Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. As always, I'm your host, Jack Eddy, and today I have the La Granja and no Siesta master himself, Andreas Odendahl, and I'm pronouncing that already, I think, wrong off the bat. I think it's Oda. So how are you doing today, Oda? Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I'm doing fine. It's a little bit early in the morning, but I already had my first coffee, so I think we are good to go.
Yeah, early in the morning for you, late at night for me, but I just had some caffeinated tea, so hopefully it'll keep me alert enough for the podcast, but not too awake so that I don't get any sleep and I'm absolutely slugging along at work tomorrow. But we're not talking about my work. We're talking about board games, and you're a designer. You have some cool games out there, and I anticipate some real cool stuff on the horizon. But I have all kinds of questions because I've talked to people in Italy about gaming. I've talked to people in France about gaming, but I really haven't had much chance to talk to many German designers. In fact, I think the only other German designer that I've spoken with is Reinhard Knizia. And I know...
And he is already almost an English guy.
Yeah. I think he had just moved back at the time that I talked with him. But yeah, he was in transition. We had a little bit of delay in organizing the podcast for us to meet together because he was busy moving back from England over to Germany. But I really don't know much about the German gaming scene. And I know that at least for many people, the idea of modern tabletop games and Euro games is all born out of Germany. So, what was your upbringing? Did you play games growing up? Were you introduced to kind of modern games later on in life? What's your history with tabletop gaming?
In Germany, there's some classics. Every kid plays with his family. And that's basically games like Pachisi or Monopoly, Risk, stuff like that. Just family stuff gaming, and we played them as well. It's normal for a German family to have games in the house, but for a real passion for gaming, the first time, I guess, was in the early 2000 years when my wife and I started playing games like a Catan card game, which was the first game that introduced us into, what I like to call real games, not the classics like Yahtzee or stuff like that. But
real games.
The German games or Euro games we now talk about. So this was the first, us meeting board games, and we were fascinated by this style of games, and it's basically how it started. And then we went on finding new games, but it's most of the time just my wife and I, and it's our hobby. We have lots of board games in the house. We play whenever we can. We meet people, of course, and we go to gaming nights, but the major board gaming is done with my wife.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. In fact, my wife and I just got playing some games together earlier, and she's kind of my main opponent or main collaborator when it comes to cooperative games. And I think that a lot of couples have found that it's a good platform for interaction. Instead of just watching TV or something, you're interacting with one another and utilizing your brain and strategizing, that kind of thing. But as far as your trajectory, so you get into playing real games and you're playing these two-player games. And when does it start to kind of click to you that you could actually be making these games?
I became really addicted to board games, and I met a guy online in a German board game forum, and he was saying that he's planning on publishing a game, and that was fascinating to me. And I come from a history of do-it-yourself ethics from the punk rock community I was a part of in the 90s, late 90s.
Okay. We need to hold on here because I have a drum set directly behind me. I'm looking at two electric basses, and then to my right, I have three guitars. Yeah, I have three guitars out. my podcast studio is also my former music studio, which I still play music from time to time, but mainly it's just teaching my kids stuff. So we have to talk about this punk rock thing. You were in the punk scene?
Yeah, kind of. I played bass myself in a band back then in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was more like a hardcore outfit, you would say.
Yeah,
very
totally.
noisy. And
were you doing this professionally, or was this just like a hobby on the side?
No, just a hobby. When I was going to college back then, we just had the time, and it was a hobby. We were also setting up gigs for bands in our hometown in a youth center, and so we had kind of a scene back in our hometown, and I was a part of it, and it was like this do-it-yourself ethic. You just do it. You do it for a hobby because out of your passion, you know. It's nothing professional. You don't want to earn money with it. You just want to provide the scene or the community with something musical. And we were setting up gigs back in our hometown, and it was a great time.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because, like, I didn't think about it then, of course, but all of the work, even dating back to when I was like 14 or something, organizing shows, getting bands together, you know, getting hopefully better bands than my own band to play with so we could attract some sort of audience. And then figuring out how we were going to have these underage shows where no one was going to end up too hurt, so that way, you know, no one was trying to shut us down, but it was still a rowdy enough time that us kids could have a lot of fun at. And gathering all the equipment and figuring out how the PAs worked and getting the amplifiers and who's using whose drum set and all that kind of stuff. That was all organization and management skills that I had no idea that I was exercising or learning at the time. That has probably been more instrumental in my professional development and success than almost anything that I learned academically in school, using the school's resources, certainly, and putting these things together. And, you know, logic came out of academics, but man, doing those shows, getting that together and following a passion and having the drive for follow through, I think has informed most of my life. And it sounds like you're referencing that too, that, you know, you were part of this DIY, do it yourself ethic. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was great. We had a German wide known punk rock band in our hometown, and the singer of them, he had a little bit of connection to a bigger scene. You know, we were only the locals, but this band was touring Germany, and they had connections, and so some bigger bands were invited to our hometown, and it was really great to meet some of my heroes back then.
Did you end up recording any music?
No, just for us.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I have a lot of 4-track recordings that were just for us. But
it was a great time.
Yeah. But getting back to board games, so you have this DIY ethic, and you are...
Yeah, so when I learned that Ralph was trying to publish a board game, I was offering my help, because that's basically what I did back in my hardcore days. Somebody is publishing a game for his own publishing company, so I offered, what can I do? Is there anything I can do for you? And so he was quite curious, because we didn't know each other, and he thought, what's that crazy guy? He's offering help for nothing. That's odd. But it was great. And the board game he was publishing was At the Gates of Loyang from Uwe Rosenberg. I helped explaining it in Essen on the fair. It was great, and this was my introduction into maybe what you call board game scene.
Oh, that's awesome. Which I think At the Gates of Loyang is still my favorite Uwe Rosenberg game. I think. I'm not sure. Caverna is up there too, but Loyang is certainly my wife's favorite, and we break it out quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm totally biased, of course, because this was the game that I explained on Essen the first time and was awesome. But I loved the game even before it was published because before Essen, I had the chance to meet Uwe and playing the prototype and playtesting it a little bit. It was the start. And back then, I thought, well, I was playing very much solitaire games. Regularly, like Le Havre, Agricola, all the Uwe games that has solitaire rules. And naturally, my own ideas came floating to my head, so I started designing my own games. And well, it was just for the fun because of all the DIY ethics in my head. I just was trying to do stuff, and this was the start.
And how did that end up manifesting as Le Granja down the road? Because you co-designed that, right, with Michael Keller?
Yes, I had some pretty bad prototypes back then. I was very thankful people were okay playing, and they were nice enough to not crush me down because the games were really bad. But I also met Mike at this Loyang explaining, because Mike was also offering his help for explaining games in Essen to hall games back then. So we met and we started talking because Mike also started designing games back then. And because he's from Switzerland and I'm from northern Germany, so it's about 600 kilometers between us. So we started emailing, video chatting, stuff like that, or just talking about game design and stuff like that. And he approached me with one of his games, and he said, I have no idea how I should proceed here. And I said, okay, let me do it. Let me take over for a little bit, and I give it back to you when I have some neat ideas. And this was the start of what later became La Granja, because I was designing a completely new game that has nothing to do with Mike's game back then. It was just the inspiration for what became La Granja. At first it was pretty close, but it developed pretty fast in a completely different direction. So after me taking over for what was back then called Dice for the Galaxy and later became Solaris Mission, because I made a new game out of it, we certainly had two games back then. So we decided the new game, what became La Granja, would be my game, and Mike's game would be a game as well. And we decided to design both games as co-designers. Just for the fun of it, because we had no expectation in being published anytime soon or ever. So it was just for the fun. So we, instead of one working game, we had two not working games, and we decided to co-design them as equals.
That's awesome. I love it. It's like you guys are working here trying to sell other people's games. It's like you're the roadies deciding, you know what, let's form a band. We can have our own band. We don't just have to be roadies here. It's awesome.
That's actually a pretty good picture, yes. Yeah, so we continued discussing the games and designing the games, and I guess La Granja became serious more quickly. And I was using some of my connections to trying to approach publishers, but actually there were not too many interest in it. Of course, my friend Ralph from Hall Games was interested, but it was a newcomer's game. It was okay, but it was not a really good game back then, and so it was okay for us. But then I was approached by Uli Blennemann from Spielworks because he saw some of my pictures I was posting on Facebook, and he invited me to his home and told me I should introduce him to my game. And I was, yeah, fine, perfect. This was a very experienced editor, and I thought, well, couldn't hurt to show him the game and maybe get some input. I could use it. I'm a new designer. I'm not experienced, and I would listen to what he has to say to me. And I met him at his home and showed him the game, and he said, okay, I will take it. And I was, well, why would you take it? It's my game. I want to take it back home and playtest it. He said, no, I will playtest it and I will publish it. And I was, wow, I just came here to listen to what you have to, some good advice, you know. And he said, no, if the playtesters say it's a good game, I will publish it.
And was Michael at this meeting as well, or is this something that you had to call him up later and go, "Hey, Michael, I guess we're getting published. I don't know really what's going on."
Yeah, no, Mike was in Switzerland, of course, and I was because Uli lives very close to me. It's only half an hour with a car. So I was going there alone, and I was showing him the prototype, and yeah, a few weeks later, I got the call, and he said, "Yeah, let's do the game," and that's it. And I was blown away, you know.
Yeah, well, the world was kind of blown away when it actually came out. That for a first-time design, Granja was just, as far as I'm concerned, everything I saw was just immensely positive feedback, at least in the type of people who want an in-depth yet very elegant Euro-style game. And I know my own experience with the game was outstanding. Like I was blown away by the multi-use of everything, especially like the cards. And that's one of the things that, if there's one thing that I wanted to ask about specifically during the design, was the system where the cards could be utilized in multiple fashions. Was that something that was part of the design early on, or is that something that came later on in the process? Was that solving an issue that you guys were up against?
No, that was actually, you know, I have to tell you a little story about this because I'm normally I am playing games, and then I realized, wow, this game is awesome, and I love this mechanic and how this game uses cards. It blows me away, and this was the fact with Glory to Rome. I played it and I hated it. The game is pure chaos. There's no balance in the cards, and it's something that, from my personal point of view, that's something I really hate, because I'm this Euro-style gamer, and I like everything balanced, and I like a sense in everything, and Glory to Rome is nothing like that, because you can exploit everything, and everything gets out of hand. But I love the way the cards were used in this game. So after the first play of Glory to Rome, when I said, wow, this game is so crappy, I decided, oh, this how he uses cards is fascinating. And I have to skip a little bit because I played the game several times, of course, because I don't judge games after one play. And I really fell in love with Glory to Rome later, but I already was sure that I wanted to design a game for myself, of course, because I never thought I would get published. I wanted to use multi-use cards like in Glory to Rome, but I wanted to design a game that fits to my personal taste in board games, because that's just what I do. I see mechanics in a board game that I don't like, but I like the mechanic. So I take the mechanic out of the game and do something different with it, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And that was basically the start, and that was the difference from the prototype that Mike was giving me back then, this what later became Solaris mission. And I changed the game and into a multi-use card game. And that's the main reason why I said back then, oh, it's a different game, because it used completely different mechanics. And later I also changed the theme from a space game to a farming game. So and I developed this game as a farming game, so it became a totally different game. So we had two games, and this multi-use cards was always the plan for La Granja. And I had to very much to learn about multi-use cards while developing the game. It was very hard.
Yeah, I gotta imagine it's like one of those things, like trying to remain concise while trying to describe something that's a vast or intricate concept. There's a real art form to that, because you want to be precise in everything, but you don't want to bloat it. And to be able to balance that in an elegant way must be incredibly tough. But that's actually something that to me is kind of the overall aesthetic of German style games. And you used that term earlier, German style, and then you, I think, corrected yourself to Euro. And I find this fascinating because I've been following games for a long, long time. Since I was very young, I was playing Magic, and then I got into working at a comic shop that sold these weird import games like Settlers of Catan, and I was like, what's going on with all this kind of stuff? And I heard the terms evolve over time, and when I was introduced to them, they were German games. You're playing German games, and then I started hearing the term Euro game, and then American game, and hybrid game, or it's very much this style or this style. And I'm wondering if at this point, if you as a German designer feel that there is something more specific to the term German style game as opposed to Euro game as a whole. Like, do you think there's a German aesthetic?
I think the reason for this is in the history of Settlers of Catan, because I guess the prototype of all German games is Settlers. This was the first game in this style that, or the huge game that became known for this, because it's a German game and it became Spiel des Jahres, and it's really huge. It's a huge brand and everybody knows it. And it marks a point in history when games became this thematic style of games, because it's not Monopoly any longer. It's not Pachisi. Now the games have a theme, and it's about goods and it's about mechanics, and this is the prototype of what became German games. And when Catan starts to get more success all over the world, there was this period of other companies or other designers trying to design games in that vein. And there was a time when some board games from France were hitting the market here. I can remember history games becoming very popular back then with Kylos. There were some British games, mostly from Martin Wallace or Richard Breeze, coming here over to Germany, and they were, kind of German-like games. Mm-hmm. And also there was this Italian designer back then, Emanuele Ornella, who was very popular here, and that was the time when the games were only German any longer. And I guess that was a time when everybody decided to call it Euro games.
But do you feel like there's any specific regional aesthetic that still exists, that maybe games still made by German designers tend to be a little bit more specific to one type of game or a style, as opposed to how the French might approach a game, or Italians, or at this point, is it so blended that it's completely indistinguishable?
Well, I guess if you want to be successful in Germany, you have to design a game that's kind of a German game, in the vein of Carcassonne or Settlers of Catan. This is the game. Both of those games are the ones that were very successful in Germany. And if you wanted to be successful with a board game, it has to be in this vein, like Spiel des Jahres or Kennerspiel des Jahres.
Yeah.
And I guess if you want to be successful in Germany, you have to design such a game that is not too complex, not too thematic, very mechanical.
Yeah.
That's basically the thing you want to have in Germany if you want to be successful. And I guess that's different in let's say, France, because there's what we like to call France-Belgium scene that's very thematic, very comic style, very unrealistic themes, and that's very French or Belgium-like, something like that. It's just something I realized when thinking about what might be German, what might be French. Yeah.
Yeah, it does have a different feeling to it. Not to say
Yeah,
that there's not crossover, and there's even Americans who
oh,
are making very, very German style games, but
yeah.
yeah, it still feels
Yeah,
like
this
that.
that's all developed in the 2000 years, I guess. It was because in maybe last 5 or 10 years, everything became a blur because the world became smaller. Everybody knows each other. We can talk over Skype now, and do this podcast. You can easily contact American publisher from my side, or American designers can approach German publishers. It's not of a problem any longer because the internet allows us to communicate on different levels. It was not possible in the 90s.
All right. Well, then, Oda, I'm expecting that you're going to start making some heavy combat, dice rolling, maybe dungeon crawl style game here very soon. It's going to have about 10,000 components. You're going to roll at least six-sided dice every time you roll. I fully expect that to be on my desk first thing in the morning.
I don't think so.
No, that's not your style. But what is on the horizon? You know, you ended up having Solarius Mission. You came out with No Siesta, which I adore. I got a chance to check that out at where was I? At Dice Tower Con this last year, and I went up to the Stronghold Games booth and was like, "Hey, this game, Mr. Stephen Bonacore, this game is incredible. I just sat at a table and played it like 5 times, and I just want to play it some more." I normally don't really take to dice distillations of larger games, but for whatever reason, that hit on most of the notes that I was really looking for out of La Granja. So that was a huge hit for me, and I'm definitely looking forward to what all the awesome games on the horizon are. Are you still actively producing a lot of work right now? Do you have things that you're able to share?
Yeah, it's actually thanks to Steven that No Siesta ever came out, I have to say, because my publisher from La Granja, it's Beerworks, who's doing pretty small print runs for No Siesta. That would not be possible because the game needs a bigger print run because it needs to be cheaper. If a company like Spielworks would produce the game, it would still cost like 40 or 50 euros, and that's not possible for such a small dice game. And when Stronghold Games said they would join in for the first print run on this game, it was possible to do a bigger print run and to sell the game with a reasonable price. It became a reality, and so it's very much thanks to Steven that the game ever came out, and that's really great. I was hoping that this would happen because the other style that I love so much, this small dice games that also have some meat, like Roll Through the Ages. It's also very light dice game, but it's also a strategy game, and that's something I really like. But for the future projects, there's actually one game in the pipeline right now I'm working on very hard. It's called Cooper Island. Right now we're not sure when we are going to publish it, but we want to have it out in Essen 2018, so this year. I hope this will come out this year.
What's Cooper Island? Like Cooper Island sounds like a island off the coast of Oregon in the U.S. I have no idea what the context of this is.
Yeah, I had a theme for this game that was a real theme, like in reality, but I couldn't make it work with the theme. So it's very important to me that I don't just put a theme on the game and that has nothing to do with the theme at all. So when we had this very unique theme back then, it was about Roanoke Island. You might know the history of the Lost Colony.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's something that Germans are not familiar with. It's something my wife came up with, and I researched everything about it, and I thought it's very, very cool theme. But I couldn't make it work, so we decided to go with just, well, you might call it a regular theme that has nothing really to do with what happened in fact. So Cooper Island is a fictional island, and it's named after our dog. One of our dogs is called Cooper.
Oh, right, right. You have several dogs. We were talking about that earlier before we started recording.
Yeah, we have actually 6 dogs.
Oh, wow. You have lots of dogs. That makes my 2 look pretty simple there. Though my larger dog, he looks like he could be 6 dogs combined. He's a giant poodle.
Well, we all have dogs that have no real race because it's all a mix. They're all from animal welfare, and we're a foster home for dogs.
Oh, that's great.
And that's the reason why we have so many. We have actually 3 dogs of our own and 3 foster dogs right now. So it's 6 dogs, and one of our own dogs, its name is Cooper. And my wife insisted that the game should be called after one of our dogs. And if I'm lucky and my publisher agrees to it, Cooper will be part of the illustrations as well. I'm pretty looking forward to this.
That's awesome. That sounds really fitting.
Yeah, and the game is about exploring an island, and you do this with puzzling the island to gain resources. And that's basically what you do in the game. You discover this island, you discover resources, and you want to use those resources to build houses, to build ships. The main thing about this game is that you're not puzzling only a 2-dimensional so you're not puzzling only the island, but you puzzling in 3D. So what you do is, when you have your first level, you can build another level above the first one. So you can gain multiple levels by puzzling the landscape tiles on your island. And the higher the level, the more useful the resource is. And this is basically the main thing in the game, that you are trying to exploit the island for resources and build the best houses and the best buildings and the best ships.
That's really interesting. Having a verticality like that. I'm trying to imagine in my head, and of course the first game that I go to with a verticality is Santorini. So are you actually like putting components onto the board and stacking them up higher to represent how high you're going, or?
No, it's actually more about the resources, because once you place one of the puzzle tiles, it's double hex puzzle tiles, and they show landscapes, shapes of landscapes. So it's maybe you place a wood and mountain tile on your island, and then you gain wood and stone as a resource. Mm-hmm. But the resource is placed on the tile, so you cannot discard the resource. So you have a problem because you want to go to another level, and reaching another level is you combine 2 tiles from the first level and put one new tile on the second level. I don't know the real word. You connect the 2 tiles and you put one above, so you have level 2.
That makes sense. Okay.
And the resources you put on the level 2 tile now have value 2. So if you have 1 wood cube on level 2, its value is 2. So you double the value of the resource. So in order to get more valuable resources and not only value 1 for your cubes, you want to go to higher levels. You have to actually, the game that inspired me to do this mechanic is Antics from Fraggle Games.
I've never actually heard of that.
Never actually heard of that. I have another example. It's Taluva. You know Taluva?
Oh, yeah.
Taluva is very similar in this aspect of puzzling.
Well, Taluva was actually the other game that I was thinking of having some verticality to it. That's another game that I got a chance to play for the first time at Dice Tower Con this year. I had a buddy who's like, yeah, let's play some weird stuff in the lending library here, stuff that never gets brought out at game nights anymore. Oh, let's play Tuluva. And I had never checked it out, and I was thrilled that I did. I think I lost horribly, but I really enjoyed that game.
Yeah, well, I was just trying to find an example to explain how the puzzling in this game works, but you should not think that Cooper Island is anything like Tallua. It's just about the puzzling aspect.
Of course.
Okay. This is basically the game that will come out, hopefully in Essen 2018.
Who's publishing that?
It's a German publisher called Frosted Games. It's very new, very small company, and you might know the Christmas calendar from this publisher.
Yeah, totally. The legendary Advent calendar.
Yeah, and he's normally, or the first few things he did was localizing games from other countries, so into German language, like Tony Boydell's Guilds of London was published by Frosted Games in Germany, and he's publishing my game now, and there will be some other board games in the near future from this publisher, and he wants to broaden his horizon and publishing games he developed himself.
That's great. Well, yeah. Oda, the hardcore music board game designer, I could talk to you forever about about music, about just the history of board games, your own trajectory, about dogs. That's a whole other thing. Though I have a purebred poodle, I have had many mutts, including my old dog Hemingway, that's appeared on the podcast many times in the past, because of having family members who have done sheltering for foster dogs. But I don't have all the time in the world, so we'll save that for episode 2. I did want to hit on a couple listener questions that came up here before I let you go. Occasionally, we turn to Twitter at Cardboard Herald. If anyone wants to follow us, we turn to Twitter for listener questions. You can also submit them via the website, www.cardboardherald.com. There's a contact link at the top. So, because we're kind of short on time here, I picked the two most interesting ones for me. And so, Steve C. asks, what was the most challenging thing about translating La Granja into a dice game?
Oh, actually, that was pretty easy.
Sorry, Steve C. It was just a piece of cake, no challenges, just came together.
No, that's not really it. But the main reason I wanted to do a dice game of it was because I thought that the dice mechanic would fit to a much smaller game. Mm-hmm. Because when I started designing La Granja, I was going for a game that would take 60 to 70 minutes playtime, and it was much easier. And I had very, very much problems balancing the game and actually having real fun for the playtester playing it, and it was more like a mediocre game all the time. And in the development, the game got more complex and more complex over and over. So when La Granja was out, I thought maybe now go in the opposite direction and try to make something very simple of the dice mechanic. And the main aim was to design a game that has only the dice and the scoring sheet. And of course, this was not to be done because it's very hard to design simple board games. It's way harder than design complex board games because you need to have a functioning, simple mechanic. And that's not easy. That's the best you can do. It's the hardest you can do to design a functioning, simple game. And so Siesta became more complex and more complex over and over, and but it still is 30 to 45 minutes playtime normally, and the hard part was to keep it as simple as possible. And yeah, I think I did not manage that. It became more complex over again.
Well, it's a good thing. At least for me, I again really adore that game, and many lunch hour have been spent here in Juneau, Alaska, figuring out who really needs all these leftover donkeys and why didn't we roll hats. Now the second question that I have here is Xavier or Javier. I don't know. I'll go with Xavier because I'm an X-Men fan. So Xavier Lewis asks, if you could design an expansion for any one game not originally designed by you, what game would it be?
Oh, well, I'm actually not that kind of a fan of expansions, to be honest, because I think when you design a board game, you want to put the best game you have into one box.
My man.
So
I love that.
So as a designer, I think it's my duty to find out what the best game would be and put this into one box.
Right.
And then there would be no necessity for an expansion because the game is already the best you can have. I'm not saying that I would never design expansions because for Cooper Island, I am already thinking about expanding it so much because I discarded so many ideas, and it would be fun to have them back in the game with an expansion. But let's publish the game first and see where it goes. Just the other day, I was talking to Yuma Al-Yuyu it's a German board game designer, and I hope I said his name right. He's the designer of Clans of Caledonia.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you have played that game.
I have. I've enjoyed it quite a bit. I got a chance to play it right before the end of the year, and man, that game, among so many others, 2017 was an incredible year for releases, but that was definitely the standout traditional Euro style game to me.
Yeah, we enjoy this game very much, and it's basically screaming for new clans, and that would be something I would love to design new clans for this game, so you have maybe 50 or so to choose from, and this would be perfect for this game. And I'm hoping he will be designing new clans so we can enjoy this game over and over again. But that would be great. Have new clans for Clans of Caledonia. And if he's not doing it, well, I will do them myself.
Yep, you'll take measures into your own hands. Start naming them after heavy metal bands.
Yeah, that's not a threat to Yuma.
Oh, man. Well, that's great. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me, waking up early on your side of the planet and talking at me all the way from Germany. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really very much would enjoy having you back on the podcast. So thank you so much, Oda.
It's very, very much fun, and thank you for the invitation, and I love podcasting, and if you want me back, just let me know. We can find a time and date.
We'll make it work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
As always, the Cardboard Herald is a completely free service providing you with interviews, reviews, and recommendations. You can find all of our stuff at cardboardherald.com or check out all of our regular content on our YouTube channel. If you are interested in contributing, have some feedback, or just want your listener mail read on air, click the contact link on our site. If you enjoyed this episode on our interview feed, check out our sister podcast, TCbH Reviews, where we give you audio versions of our reviews, followed by a look behind the scenes of what went into making them. Lastly, this episode was edited and produced by Rob Conley of Ginger Cat Productions. Have a new audio project you need help with? Whether it's music or podcasting, Ginger Cat Productions can help you out. Find them at gcatproductions.com. Once again, thank you for listening. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald, and you keep on gaming.